All right, welcome. Thank you everybody for being with us today. Thanks for joining us. We can go ahead and get started. We're glad that you're here for today's training, Pro Bono Representation of Youth in Immigration Court, an overview of agency policy and practical guidance. This is going to be a 1-hour webinar, and I'm going to start by introducing the Children's Immigration Law Academy, or CILA for short. So we are a project of the American Bar's Commission on Immigration. We focus on children's immigration matters, and we are a legal resource center. We are a capacity building organization, and so we are supporting attorneys, legal staff, social services staff, and pro bono attorneys working on children's immigration cases. We think that children should not have to go to immigration court alone, or any court by that matter, and that's a primary reason that we do the work that we do. So CILA is based in Houston, Texas, and we have a lot of staff in Houston, as well as a lot of staff that's working remotely from various areas across the country. We provide services nationally, along with some Texas-specific services. So this slide shows all of CILA's services, and I'll start by going over our 4 key services. So first, we create written resources, which are available on our website. And you can also set up a free CILA account to access more resources. So we welcome you to do that. And one of our handouts, for example, is behind that account access. So it might be useful to go ahead and do that now or after the training, so you can access that handout. We also host 6 different working groups on topics like asylum law, special immigrant juvenile status, and pro bono coordination for those who are pro bono coordinators, working with pro bono attorneys. And the purpose of our working groups is to provide a space for collaboration and community. And our working groups are held quarterly via Zoom. We provide technical assistance, and this is regarding case-specific questions relating to children and youth in immigration cases. So we provide technical assistance to answer case-specific questions about legal issues and also social services issues for those who are in the Acacia network. And so you might be wondering, what is TA? I think that's a common question. So, but basically, if you have a question when you're working on a case, and this might be about case development, strategy, might be a research issue, looking for resources, or looking at the law, then you can contact us and ask for assistance. We have web forms on our website where you're able to do that very easily, and we'll respond with the information that you're looking for to the best of our abilities. And if you are a pro bono attorney who took on a case from CILA's platform, or if you're providing pro bono representation to an organization within the Acacia network, then you can also look to us for that technical assistance support. We also host trainings such as this one. We're glad you're here. And these trainings are typically for attorneys, social services staff, advocates, and pro bono attorneys. We also have programs focused on pro bono and social work to support advocates specifically in those areas. And we're going to be going over some of our pro bono related services in a little bit more detail throughout this training today. Also, in times of increased need at the border, CILA has been there to help. So before we get started with today's presentation, I'm going to cover some housekeeping matters. This is a 1-hour webinar. And so please use that Q&A box rather than the chat function to enter your questions. And at the end, we're going to have some time for Q&A. If you have any case-specific questions, please contact CILA after the training for that type of support, rather than Q&A for today's training. We did set up a web page on CILA's website that includes information for today's training, including the PowerPoint slides, if you'd like that to follow along. We also have a couple of handouts, and my colleague's going to enter that information in the chat for you. We also are recording this training, and so we will add the training recording to that same web page, and that usually takes us about a couple weeks to post that. So, you'll have that available to you in the future. We will also seek feedback at the end of today's presentation, and a survey will automatically pop up once you close your Zoom. So please do just take a few minutes just to let us know how we did today, any feedback, and we always do read that, take it to heart. And if you have ideas for other trainings, please let us know that information too. Okay, so let's get to the agenda for today's presentation. And so first, my colleague Amelia is going to cover information about CILA's pro bono platform and how to get involved. as well as how CELA can support your pro bono efforts. Then I'm going to give an overview of some immigration court policy, and we'll have a panel discussion about juvenile dockets to learn more from practitioners on the ground. And we'll close the day with some information on how to stay connected with CELA. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Amelia.
Thank you so much, Laura. Good afternoon, everyone. As Laura mentioned, my name is Amelia Friedman. I am a staff attorney with CELA in our Houston office, and thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. As Laura mentioned, we host a lot of different types of trainings at CELA, and this one in particular is for pro bono attorneys, either folks who are currently working on a case or for folks who might be interested in a case and want to learn more about how to get involved. So we do like to talk a little bit about our platform here first. And this platform is called the Pro Bono Matters for Children Facing Deportation. It's on CELA's website, and this slide has a link. There's a direct link to it that'll take you to the page. It's a free platform. It also doesn't require a login or anything like that to access. And basically, it's a space where we partner with about 20 legal service providers or nonprofits working with immigrant children and youth on their immigration cases throughout the country. And CELA creates this space for them to post available opportunities. And these can be opportunities to take an entire case. They can also be opportunities to take a piece of the case for those who might not be able to commit to taking on a full representation. We also have some volunteer opportunities available on there that are for, they don't necessarily require an attorney, a licensed attorney, and so it can be for anybody who's interested in getting involved, and some of them can be done remotely. A lot of them note if the organization is offering mentorship opportunities, and some of them will also note if the client speaks a language that is not English, if that is particular concern for you too, though I will also note that CELA has a number of resources for working with interpreters and translators. And so we'd like to encourage people to take cases even if you don't necessarily feel like you're fluent in the client's best language, because there can be ways to still work with these particular clients. And we offer this platform as a way to help children have more representation. CELA is a little bit like a middleman in this role, in that we are not necessarily, we're not ever directly working on these cases, but we do have a bunch of resources for people who take cases, and I'll talk a little bit about that at the end, and we really encourage you to check it out. So on the next slide, it'll show you a little bit more. When you get to the webpage, it'll look like what was on the last slide at the top with some general information. And then you'll scroll down, it'll show you these case cards, and these are posted by the organizations. For instance, one of the organizations we work with is Safe Passage Project. You're gonna hear from Alex, one of their attorneys in the panel this afternoon. After hearing from her, you're thinking, great, would love to work more with her organization. You can go to the platform and you can do a keyword search for the organization, or you can filter by the different organizations using the partners filter. You can also look in different regions. You can look for different legal problems and opportunity types. We really hope it's kind of like an easily to search database, so you can search for the different opportunities out there and hopefully find something that works for you. If you find something, then the next slide shows you how to express interest in the case. And so on this one, this is an opportunity with Catholic Legal Services in Miami. You will also be hearing from one of their attorneys this afternoon, Max, who's great. They have opportunities available in Florida. If you're interested in working on a case there, you can find the case card there, read about it. On the bottom, as it's circled on the slide, there's a button on every case card to click if you're interested. And all you have to do is put your name, your email, and a phone number. If for whatever reason you don't feel comfortable sharing the phone number, I think it's really essential just to do the name and the email. You can also add your bar number. And then when you click submit, it will automatically send your information to the organization that has posted the opportunity. And it will be an opportunity to, they should hopefully get your information and then reach out to you directly. If for some reason the organization and you are not able to connect after about a week, we also encourage you to reach out to CELA directly, and we're happy to help facilitate that connection. But a lot of the organizations we work with are great and pretty responsive, and so hopefully you should hear from them soon, and then they'll move forward with you on kind of placing the case and determining if it's a good match for the opportunity, and then hopefully move forward with it. There's a couple other features of the platform that I just want to highlight. One of them is that if for some reason you're looking at the case cards and there's nothing that's currently available for you, You can also sign up to receive notifications, or if maybe you find one that's interesting, but you want to know about more that are similar to it, you can enter based on kind of types of cases or location or the organization and get notifications for future case cards that are posting. That's all done by an email notification. You can also share opportunities. Each of the case cards, and this is actually on the next slide, will show you that in the bottom right-hand corner of each case card, there is a button that you press and it'll show you how to share the opportunity. Each case card has its own unique hyperlink, and you just have to copy and paste it, and then you can take you directly to the case card. So we hope that you will check out that platform. There are organizations throughout the country that are posting. The next slide kind of has a little bit of a summary. I believe one of the handouts also has this information. So in addition to the individual case cards having unique hyperlinks, the organizations also have some unique hyperlinks. So if you know you want to work with a particular organization or you want to look at the opportunities in a particular state, you can use these links. They should all be active on the slide or in the handout to just go directly to those opportunities. As I mentioned, we have about 10 states, and hopefully there's one in your area. If for whatever reason there isn't an opportunity in your particular area, you could definitely check out some of these remote nationwide areas to look at. So that's the platform, and I'm just going to talk really briefly too about some of our resources. As Laura mentioned, we have a lot of different resources at CELA. The two that I kind of want to highlight are, we have a pro bono guide that's about 150 pages, super comprehensive. And this one is actually available for free without a CELA account. So there's a direct link to it on the slide, and you can also get to it from the platform page. And it'll have information about common forms of relief, immigration court, working with children. It's meant to be kind of a primer for anyone who's new to this work or new to a particular type of work. We also have 101 series. These are recorded webinars that are available for free. And we encourage you to join for some of our future trainings or to sign up to check out some of our more advanced written resources. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Laura.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Amelia. So now we're going to turn over to the topic of immigration court policy. So that's what we're going to spend some time giving an overview of some information before we get to the panel discussion. So EOIR stands for the Executive Office for Immigration Review, and this is an agency within the Department of Justice. So just to give some background information and kind of set the scene for what we're talking about today, particularly for those of you who may be new to this area. So the immigration court is part of EOIR, and EOIR's mission is to adjudicate immigration cases by fairly, expeditiously, and uniformly interpreting and administering the nation's immigration laws. So if you're representing a client in removal proceedings, then they will be going to immigration court. The picture on the slide gives just an idea of what an immigration court looks like. Of course, courts are going to vary depending on their particular office, but this just gives a general idea of what many immigration courts look like. And there are two main types of hearings in immigration court as well for children's cases. Of course, there's bond hearings. I'm not going to focus on those. So I'm going to just talk about master calendar hearings and individual calendar hearings and just go over what those are briefly, since we'll be talking about them a little bit later in the panel. So master calendar hearings are hearings that cover more procedural matters, such as taking pleadings, scheduling, filings. They're usually shorter in nature, more procedural, and they usually run on a docket. Then individual calendar hearings are typically known as merits hearings. So this is a hearing that's set specifically for your client. It's going to typically not run on a docket. You have a specific time and date for your client to show up. And this is where the judge will be hearing any testimony, hearing from witnesses. You would have submitted your evidence in advance of the hearing, but the judge will go through that and generally will give a ruling on the issue. So when practicing in immigration court, it's important to be familiar with relevant rules, policy, the forms involved, all of the information you really need to know to be able to do your job well in immigration court. So I'm just going to highlight some of this information. I'll also note that the EOIR's website is very helpful, and this slide has links, but they all link to the EOIR website in just different areas of the website where you can find these details. You can find a map with information about each court. So you have just more localized court information, including Addresses, of course, contact information, the judges. You can find the operational status of different locations and information if you're going to be doing an internet-based hearing or a remote proceeding. And then the Immigration Court Practice Manual is a very important tool and resource to be familiar with because it lays out procedures, requirements, recommendations for practice before immigration court. It contains material about appearing before immigration court, filings, hearings before immigration judges, motions, appeals, forms, and other important information. So if you can tell, that's a very important reference point to look at if you're going to be practicing in immigration court. EOIR also issues policy memoranda, and this gives guidance to the adjudicators and court personnel on a variety of issues. And so we're going to be talking about a couple policy memoranda today. Again, you have the slides and all of this links back to EOIR's website. So for the policy memoranda, we're going to turn our attention there. EOIR offers additional reference materials on their website, and that's divided by chapter. In chapter 10, you find agency memoranda. So primarily, I wanted to include this slide just so you know there's a lot of memoranda. We're only touching on a couple of these policy memos today, but it's really important to be familiar with many, if not all of these, if you're going to be practicing in immigration court. And this slide doesn't even show, the full list here. You have to go online to see that. But there's several that cover different procedural aspects in removal proceedings, the status docket, enforcement priorities, administrative closure, those remote hearings, language access. So a lot of important topics. And then I highlighted some in yellow and pink that are particularly relevant to children's immigration matters. So the two directors memoranda that we're going to cover today are highlighted in yellow on the slide. So that's DM 2401, Children's Cases in Immigration Court, and DM 2201, Encouraging and Facilitating Pro Bono Legal Services. The other two DMs that I highlighted in pink, we're not going to cover these in detail, but I just wanted to briefly address them. So the first is DM 2303, the role of child advocates in immigration court. And so this discusses the history of child advocates, goes through, what a child advocate is, your young center, they will create and provide a best interest determination for an unaccompanied child. And this is only done in very rare situations for those children who are most vulnerable. And typically they are appointed when the child is in ORR, Office of Refugee Resettlement, so they're detained. So even though this will only come up in limited situations, still important just to be aware of. And then the second is DM 2206, friend of the court. So again, I'm not going to go into this, but it does go over, what is a friend of the court? And this is typically somebody who's acting as an aide to the court in pro se cases to help facilitate efficiency of immigration court proceedings and also to help a respondent understand the nature of their proceedings. So we'll just reference later on in the panel, friend of court. So I wanted to just give a little bit of context there of what that is. And you can always go to this DM if you want to learn the details. Okay, so now for DM 2401, one of the focuses today, this particular memorandum was issued in December 2023 on children's cases in immigration court. This DM superseded and rescinded a prior policy memorandum, OPPM 1703. That was the prior guidance on children's cases in immigration court. And so this is the new agency policy. It's very helpful and a very good resource and reference to take a look at. And it applies to all cases in immigration court involving children. So whether they're the respondent, a witness, whether they're legally defined as an unaccompanied child or have that designation, or whether they do not. It also applies to anyone who's under age 21. And so with this DM, it stated that all courts, if there's enough children's cases in that court, in that jurisdiction, they will have a specialized juvenile docket. And this is where a respondent is under the age of that 21, but they're not part of a family unit. And this also includes children who might be detained or those who are not detained. It can cover either one. So for these dockets, they're going to be scheduled at specific times and dates separate from adults cases. So having that layer of separation is really helpful. And also there's going to be designated specific immigration judges to handle the juvenile dockets. It also notes that the Department of Homeland Security, Office of Principal Legal Advisor, that's OPLA, or basically just the attorney for the government, they're going to endeavor to have points of contact to manage cases on the juvenile docket. With this DM, there was an emphasis also on facilitating pro bono representation and providing pro bono lists to children as well. It encourages and welcomes the participation of friends of court, so that's really helpful. And then it also notes that the judges should always inform children of any relief from removal, so having that kind of layer of protection. It also encourages that judges be mindful that many times children are seeking relief outside of immigration courts and perhaps before a different agency like USCIS. And for example, if they are seeking asylum before USCIS, that might be a good situation for dismissal if there's no dispute in that matter, just to have efficiency and fairness. So that can be a very helpful aspect of this DM to look at as well. And then the DM reviews child-friendly courtroom procedures. And so these are ways to try to make the courtroom experience a little bit better for children. As you can imagine, children, adults, everybody get nervous before court, and it can be intimidating for anyone. So these are just ways to make it a little bit more child-friendly. So it encourages judges to explain the procedures to children, perhaps to take off that judicial robe to make sure that children feel a little bit more comfortable and at ease if that's intimidating, allowing a child to have a courtroom orientation, so basically to take a walk around the courtroom and experience it before it's full of people, allowing the child to bring a small toy or comfort item or stuffed animal, allowing the time for the court interpreter and child to develop some rapport before getting started, so they can introduce themselves and be a little bit more friendly and comfortable. And there's also really important references that can be helpful in master calendar hearings or individual calendar hearings, just depending on the context, to limit the number of and length of hearings, because sometimes attention spans are shorter for children, or maybe if they're talking about sensitive matters, that can be difficult and a long duration. And noting that it may be more appropriate to rely on a child's written statement rather than going through testimony. It also encourages child-sensitive questioning and includes an attachment with guidance about child-sensitive questioning for judges, and notes that, if a child fails to appear, perhaps first issue a continuance, re-verify the child's address before issuing an in absentia order, so before doing a removal order in their absence. So that's another helpful aspect of this director's memorandum. OPLA at the same timing issued a news alert regarding juvenile dockets and a framework to handle cases on the juvenile docket. So right around the same time when this DM was issued, they issued that news alert. And it indicates, assigning OPLA juvenile points of contact, streamlining reviews of requests for prosecutorial discretion, collaborating with attorneys, nonprofits who are working with children on joint motions, requests for prosecutorial discretion, or issues like voluntary departure. So that's helpful to kind of see their perspective on it as well. And this is all linked in the PowerPoint slide if you want to read that. The second memo I wanted to flag here is DM 2201, and this is encouraging and facilitating pro bono legal services. This was issued a little bit earlier in November 2021, so it's a bit older, but still relevant and worth highlighting. And there's several positive aspects of this memo as well. And it's very important if you're involved in pro bono representation or if you coordinate pro bono cases and work with pro bono attorneys, then it's important to be aware of. So this memo acknowledges that services provided by legal service providers, nonprofits, law school clinics are valuable. And they help not only those individuals that are being represented and assisted, but also the courts, because it helps with efficiency and it helps with cleaner records and people understanding the process. So the DM states that EOIR welcomes and encourages pro bono representation and seeks to accommodate that as much as possible. I think just a couple of helpful points, encourages flexibility for scheduling hearings and for filing deadlines. So it can accommodate appropriate requests, maybe for a continuance or to advance a hearing date. So that can be really helpful because they're acknowledging that, it's timelines are tight sometimes, or specific, for people that are getting involved on a pro bono basis. It also notes for advocates to identify themselves orally in the record, as well as to check that box in the EOIR 28, the representation form. It encourages to allow pro bono representatives to have a second chair. So this is, if there's a primary representative, for them to have somebody else sit with them at the bench at the hearing. So maybe this is a mentor or a professor who's supervising, a clinician student, or maybe it's just another pro bono attorney who's working on the case as well. There's also a paragraph in this memo directly related to children's cases to encourage pro bono representation, noting that vulnerability of child respondents, to encourage pro bono facilitation in those cases. So again, a lot of helpful aspects, and we just wanted to give an overview of those memos before we jump into our panel discussion. So joining us today for our panel discussion are two practitioners in the field who work in children's immigration law. And so Alexandra Rizzio. Alex is a managing attorney for policy and partnerships at Safe Passage Project in New York. And Max Wadiz. Max is a staff attorney for Catholic Legal Services Archdiocese of Miami in Florida. So we have their bios on our training webpage, but we're so glad that you are here with us, and we thank you so much. We're grateful that you're joining us and to share your experience. And so I'm excited to hear from you. And so this slide covers some of the main issues that we'll be going over today. I'm sure we're going to be covering more than this, but just to kind of give everybody in the audience a little bit of information of what we plan to cover. So to see you, Alex and Max, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having us.
So maybe just to get us started, could y'all generally just tell us your experience practicing in juvenile dockets in immigration court?
Sure, I'll jump in. Thanks, Laura, and thanks to everybody at CELA. Safe Passage has really found the technical assistance materials that you all have put out to be incredibly helpful for our pro bono attorneys. So it's great to be here. So my experience working on juvenile dockets goes back to 2014, 2015. New York, I'm based in New York. And at that time, we were seeing an increasing number of youth enter the US, and those youth in particular were designated unaccompanied minors, and then they were then transferred to New York and released to live with family members or family friends. And so I began working as a staff attorney at Safe Passage Project, specifically on the juvenile docket, and have done so ever since. So the juvenile docket in New York has had a variety of iterations. During COVID, it sort of shut down entirely along with everything else. And now we're seeing a kind of resurgence of juvenile dockets in the immigration courts in New York.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. And Max, can you tell us a little bit more about your experience as well, practicing on juvenile dockets?
It's definitely a more enjoyable experience for the attorney and for the respondents than with the adult dockets, or at least not as painful as much as immigration court is. The immigration judges are definitely wanting to help the child. They keep their best interest in mind. I see them a lot more willing to dismiss or terminate and push the OPLA attorneys to dismiss or terminate if it is appropriate, rather than insisting that it stay in the court's jurisdiction. I also find that OPLA attorneys are also more agreeable as well, especially with the younger children and unaccompanied children. Everyone wants to help them.
Great, thank you. And so I know y'all are in Florida and in New York, which is great to kind of hear different perspectives, but are all juvenile dockets the same when you're considering judge to judge, court to court, state to state? Just to the extent that you know, how does that look?
So the Miami court has 3 different judges that have a juvenile docket, and each judge runs their courtroom a little bit differently. One judge does group advisals. The other 2 judges go one by one and explain everything to each respondent individually. One judge does things differently for each respondent depending on their age and does a very individualized approach there's no set standard in our court.
In New York, I would say it's similar to an extent. We now have 3 immigration courts, all within about a 10-block radius of each other, in Lower Manhattan. So there are judges in each of those courts who have been assigned to the juvenile docket. Each judge does handle things slightly differently, but for the most part, there's pretty good uniformity across judges and across courts, at least in the New York area.
Okay. And so are the juvenile dockets new in your immigration courts, or have they been in place for a while? You'll touch on this a little bit, but if you can elaborate more, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I don't know. I started doing this work in 2014, 2015, and we had a juvenile docket then. I believe it was relatively new at that time. But yeah, we've had, at this point in New York, it's been at least 10 years.
Miami Court has also had a juvenile docket for a while. Post-COVID, they increased the number of judges. Before COVID, there was only 1 or 2 judges on the having juvenile dockets, and now it's up to 3. So it's definitely expanded, but it's also been around for quite a while.
Okay. So it sounds like with this DM, there weren't the issuance or the creation of juvenile dockets in your areas because those were already existent, but that may not be the case in every area across the country. There might be some areas where juvenile dockets are new as well. Okay, great. Oh, and what is different about immigration court when you're representing children versus working with an adult, if you know? Anything that you can see in terms of those differences?
I mean, the thing that comes to mind is that specifically for youth, there are a variety of forms of immigration relief that the immigration judge will not be able to adjudicate. So for example, even if an unaccompanied minor has an open removal case, if they've been designated an unaccompanied alien child or a UAC, their first bite at the asylum apple is before the asylum office. So it's technically a defensive case, but for the purposes of asylum filings, it's treated as affirmative. So in the first instance, the immigration judge who's hearing who has the removal proceedings has no control over the asylum case. So it's really about updating the immigration judge and making it clear that you're pursuing UAC asylum. Same for special immigrant juvenile status. Obviously, the immigration judge cannot issue a special immigrant juvenile visa. They can't issue the family court orders that you need to apply for a juvenile visa. So it's really about keeping the immigration judge up to date. And at least in New York, and I know we'll get into this, but at least in New York, once you show that your client is, it has moved along in their case to a certain extent. Now, whether, it's dependent on the judge and the OPLA attorney, but whether that means, having filed an I-360 petition with USCIS or having filed a UAC 589 asylum filing, you may be able to either get the case fully terminated, maybe admin closed if that's something that you're interested in. So certainly, cases involving youth can move a little bit more quickly in the sense that because the judge doesn't have full adjudicatory control over the case, they may be willing to actually terminate as long as you prove that you're doing something else in the proper forum.
I would like to second everything Alexandra says. I've had the same experience in my courtroom. I also want to add that with the new prosecutorial discretion memo, almost all kids' cases are eligible for prosecutorial discretion. So if there's a bad asylum or no other good form of relief, prosecutorial discretion has become a real option that the judges encourage us to take.
Okay, very helpful. So there's just a lot more opportunity potentially for dismissal or termination in children's matters, and kind of considering utilization of all the different procedural options and mechanisms that you can do in immigration court. Very helpful. And so considering, many people on our call today may be new to immigration court, or maybe working on their first case, what would you recommend that they do to get acquainted with immigration court procedure before having that first matter?
I recommend watching master calendar hearings. They're open to the public. If you're an attorney, you could sit in the courtroom and watch a morning docket, and learning and seeing other attorneys make mistakes. You watch the judge you're going to be in front of and see what they like, what they don't like. Every judge, like in every other type of court, has their own idiosyncrasies, but observation is the best thing. And I take new attorneys with me to observe court whenever possible, whenever they're starting at our office.
I completely agree. Absolutely, new attorneys or people who are new to this area of law should observe court hearings. I also think it's really important, especially with children's cases, that an attorney new to this area be mentored by by another attorney with expertise. So that's one of the things that Safe Passage Project does. The cases that are listed on the CELA website that are available for pro bono representation, those cases are assigned a Safe Passage mentor attorney. So whichever pro bono ultimately works with that client, they will have the benefit of having a Safe Passage mentor attorney guide them throughout the life of the case. And that's especially important because, like I said, a kid's case is not lived fully in immigration court. You're going to family court or to a juvenile court in your jurisdiction. You're going to the asylum office. So it's important to know when and how you can make certain requests, when you're supposed to be filing. It's really like playing three-dimensional chess, but it's not that complicated. It's just like you have all of these different layers, and you just need to know when to do what. It's not rocket science, but having someone tell you when and how to file something, or the order in which you're supposed to do something can be really helpful. So having a mentor to get that process started, I think, is really essential.
Great. And that kind of leads us to the next question as well. What advice you'd give to an attorney representing a child in immigration court for the first time? So, representing a child, it can be different than representing an adult. So, what advice would you give in that instance?
For me, I mean, that really, it's a great question. And I think the answer starts before you're talking about court. The answer starts with your relationship with the client. So if you don't have a good relationship with the client already, start working on it, right? So have a meeting where your goal is not to extract information from the client, where your goal is literally just to get to know them, especially if they're very young. Talk about things that they like. Ask them if they like sports. Do they like soccer? The Knicks are in the playoffs. Find out what they enjoy, and so that they can begin to trust you. And then maybe your second or your third meeting, you can talk about what court is going to be like and really lay it out. Like, say, I'm going to meet you and your aunt, whoever is the adult with the child. I'm going to meet you and your aunt at the Dunkin' Donuts on Broadway down the street. And then we're going to walk to the immigration court, and we're going to have to take off our shoes and our belts. And they're going to make sure that we don't have anything dangerous on us. Then we're going to take the elevator up to the 14th floor. We're going to wait in a waiting room, like literally explain everything. We're going to sit together at the table. There's going to be an interpreter there. I'm going to be the one talking to the judge, but the judge might ask you your name and your age and what grade you're in. Like, all of that stuff so that they're ready, so that they know, first of all, that you know what you're doing, and second of all, so that they feel comfortable, that they know what to expect. And you can explain to them, and this is the question that I think most of my clients are, this is what my clients, many of them don't realize and what they want to hear, which is to say, the judge is not going to order you deported. It's not like we can lose the case during this master calendar hearing and then they're going to take you away. That's a real fear that many of my clients have. And so being able to assuage that fear and explain this is one step in a longer process. No one's taking you away today. We're just going to go check in with the judge, and then we're going to do all this other stuff and we're going to get it squared away.
Yes. So I also bring everyone to my office first. I go through every step with them before a hearing. I explain to them the possible best case scenario, the possible worst case scenario, everything between, and that the worst case scenario usually isn't that bad in these sort of situations. I also like to put fidget toys in my briefcase, especially for the younger kids, and for the adults also. But those sort of little things make a difference when you're in a courtroom with a child, because it's very hard and scary to be sitting at counsel table. If the child's young, I have the parent sit at counsel table as well, even though they're not a party to the proceeding because of their age, they're allowed to sit next to them. And that usually is very calming for the children. And then additionally, I think it's important to read all the applicable director's memos. It's important. There's a lot of stuff in there that you wouldn't think about. There's a lot of details, a lot of points where it just may make that much of a difference in how you present your case and in what relief you ask for. And it's constantly changing as well. So if you know the law from last year, it's changed 5 times since then. You really need to keep up to date with that director's memo page, because it changes so frequently, and that information is so important with how we protect children.
It's really valuable and helpful information. And, you know, it's also, if somebody's working on a case pro bono, there are resources to support them to stay up to date on those changes as well through CELA and through the organization that is working and posted that matter with the pro bono attorney. So that's a helpful reminder too.
I would like to add one more thing.
Yeah.
Especially for the children's cases, the children's law is so specific that a lot of other immigration attorneys don't even deal with. Other attorneys in the community call me and ask if things have changed. And I'm happy to say this is the state of the law. If you're having trouble finding those resources or have a specific question, reach out to an expert in these children's cases, because we're happy to help you. We're just happy you're helping the kids and are able to provide them with full representation.
That's a great point, Max. So are there protections that you can ask for in children's cases to make the process more child-friendly? We've talked about some of these tips, but you know, whether it's something from the DM on children's cases or something else, are there ways you can ask for cases to be more suitable and more comfortable for a child?
Yeah, in my court, when I go to court, the judges are very happy to recess cases. If something's complicated during a hearing, we ask the judge for a recess. They can call up a different case in the meanwhile. And then after that case is resolved, we can go back up. And the judges like this so much because they don't have to waste time with the interpreter. They don't have to explain things 5 times to the clients. We could ask for a recess, say, Your Honor, this child needs another way to explain this. Can we have a recess? Could we take them out to a pro bono room, explain to them what's happening? And then after you call the next case, could we come back in to finish this hearing? And this saves a lot of time for the court, and it makes things a lot easier and less scary for the child as well. So it's one of those things where everyone is happy with this sort of thing. And it's kind of weird to ask for a recess when it's not strictly necessary how we think of it traditionally. But in these situations, the judges are very happy to grant it because it just makes the whole court process move smoother and lets them get through their master calendar documents, which are already overwhelmed.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I also really like to use motion practice in immigration court. So if it's possible for me to avoid appearing at a master calendar hearing, I will 100% take that option. And or I will request that my client not be required to appear personally. So I have filed standalone motions to waive the respondent's presence. And I will say in the title, I will title it, motion to waive an unaccompanied child's presence. And then my exhibit would be proof that they're enrolled in school. Some school letter, hopefully, from the principal or the enrollment officer or whatever, saying, X client, X person is a 8th grade student at whatever middle school. Contact us with more questions. I'll just include that as an exhibit. Even if it's during the summer, which is a little bit different. If they're going to summer school, if they're doing English classes or something like that, I will still make that request because I just don't think, immigration law can be done in these contexts. A lot can be done via motion. And if I can avoid having my client come into this giant, scary federal building and, to sit before a judge while I do most of the talking, I would like that.
Alexandra, could I ask you a quick follow-up on that?
Yeah, please.
For those motions, do you have an adult be present in the child's absence, or are you there solely?
Usually I'm there solely. So recognizing that might not be allowed in other jurisdictions, if the attorney of record is present, that's usually sufficient on the New York dockets. I may also, in addition to filing a motion to waive presence, I may do, and I know that this is not favored, but I may do like a combined motion. So a motion to continue, laying out for the judge what we've accomplished so far, and in the alternative, a motion to waive the child's presence. So telling the judge, this is the update, maybe I've done written pleadings already or something like that. This is the update on the case. I don't really think we need to come in person, but you're the judge, you let us know. And in the alternative, if you do want to see someone, can you please excuse my client? I will come personally. And that generally is fine.
Very helpful. So another question, in your jurisdiction, have you seen any changes in immigration court after that latest DM 2401, Children's Cases in Immigration Court? So that was issued again in December 2023. I know y'all already had juvenile dockets, but did you see any changes as a result?
So I think what's been useful for advocates in the New York area is that it allows us to, we can hang our hat on something when we want to ask the court administration for a meeting, for example. It helps us in our advocacy to say, we would really love a point person on, obviously there are XYZ judges on the juvenile docket, but let's just have a meeting and see how it's going. Or, with OPLA, with the attorneys for ICE, we have been able on the advocacy side to say, let's just chat about how this is going. So it kind of gives us an in to have more general conversations. Because we've had a pre-existing juvenile docket, it didn't revolutionize the practice, but it does give us a hook to ask pointed questions, to propose certain things that we think would be in line with the memoranda. So we in the New York advocate space, that's kind of how we've been using it.
Okay.
Great. Were you going to add something, Max?
No, I don't. Never mind. I apologize. Yeah.
No, you're good. And so I wanted to also just address the other DM 2201, encouraging and facilitating pro bono legal services. Do you use aspects of that in, oral argument or when encouraging pro bono attorneys to be involved? Does that come up at all?
The judges here definitely are happy the cases are being taken by pro bono attorneys. However, when it gets to the actual how the cases are treated, how the cases are called, they are, to my experience and knowledge, they're treated like private attorneys. The judges are just happy they're there, but there's no special treatment in how they're called.
Yeah, I think that's right for New York as well. I mean, we certainly recommend that our pro bono attorneys make it clear that they're working with Safe Passage. So even though they're not employed, obviously they're not employed by Safe Passage, but we recommend that they try to stick that association in wherever they can. Obviously on the EOIR 28, they should be checking pro bono representation. There are a few judges who are willing to let pro bonos kind of jump the line. I don't think it's super common. But at the very least, they show goodwill towards the pro bono attorneys. And I think that makes the process a little bit easier on the pro bono. So, if it's your first time, if you're a corporate attorney and it's your first time actually standing up in court, in any court, if you let the immigration judge know you're a pro bono, you're working on behalf of Safe Passage or Catholic Charities or whatever, the judge is going to hopefully slow down for you a little bit, especially if you say, this is my first hearing. Most of the judges are not going to take advantage of that. They are going to be respectful of the fact that that you're learning and that you're doing this for free, right? Because it really does make their docket move more smoothly when everybody is represented, even if you have to slow down a little bit for a pro bono. So, they'll instead of doing the like rapid fire, like, do you admit, concede, what's the country, or what country do you designate? They'll, actually say the full sentences. And I think that can be really helpful for pro bonos, just to kind of have, I wouldn't call it a welcoming environment. It's still court, but at least it's comprehensible. You know what's going on.
At least with my experience in the Miami court, they are not as friendly as New York. If you're representing someone, you're expected to know what you're doing in this court, and that's why mentorship is so important.
Yeah, they're not going to be happy if you walk in and you're getting ready to plead to an NTA and you say they plead guilty. They're not going to be happy with that. That is not how it should go. You will hopefully be prepped better than that. But I do think, in my experience, the judges in New York are happy to kind of walk through things with a pro bono. They're not going to give you the answers. They want you to know how to answer the questions, but maybe they'll slow it down a little bit for you.
Well, really appreciate all of your suggestions and advice. Just due to time, want to turn to our questions and see what's here. So we have a question. Are you finding that judges are willing to terminate, or OPLA agrees to dismiss once an I-360 SIJS is filed, or have they preferred the I-360 to be approved and deferred action granted?
I see a little of both. I will also say the I-360s are being adjudicated. The turnaround is relatively prompt. So it's not taking like a year to get an adjudication. It's taking maybe 4 to 5 months. So, I mean, I'm seeing in those instances, we may just wait to ask for, prosecutorial discretion in the form of a joint motion to dismiss. But we haven't found that there's any harm in asking, prior to that. And sometimes it works. So it's kind of up to, at least in the New York area, you don't really lose anything by kind of communicating with the OPLA attorney and checking in to see what their stance is. Maybe you don't have to prepare a whole motion. You can just email them and say, without having seen anything else, what's your view? What would your stance be on dismissing at this point?
And even if that doesn't work, the judges don't want to have a hearing for a case that they're going to dismiss anyway. A motion to continue is a great second option if you can't get dismissal and termination.
Totally.
Great. There's another question about where do you find mentors as a pro bono attorney?
Safe Passage Project. If you're based in New York, we work with any, we of course screen all of our pro bono attorneys, but if we think it's a good fit on both sides, and the pro bono is willing to take on a case, from beginning to end for us is usually with the filing of the I-360 petition for a SIDG case and the termination of removal proceedings. So if an attorney is willing to commit to that, we will provide them mentorship for that.
That's exactly how we do things here as well.
And so that is something that's going to really depend on the organization that you're taking the pro bono case with. If it's something that you're looking for a mentor, then, many organizations offer mentorship, some do not. So it's just a matter of having those conversations and getting more details about how it works. And then, of course, as mentioned, there's always trainings and resources and other support aspects that you can turn to too. There is a question. Oh, go ahead.
I'd like to add one more thing as well. A lot of pro bono attorneys want to do removal defense for children, and that's not really something that a lot of, at least the organization, does, because we more want to focus on either that quasi affirmative relief, which takes years and years and years to adjudicate, or the I-360, which is a more permanent form of relief. So it's also tempering those expectations is a lot of what we do in people call, at least in our office.
Just seeing what types of projects and cases are available and if that matches the different areas that they're interested in getting involved in. Great. There's another question about this individual says they're a couple months from taking the bar and any recommendations to start better understanding immigration law practice, just where to get started.
I would say, there are lots of trainings available. CELA publicizes some. There are like immigration boot camps available. They cost money. So if you're not employed yet by a firm or a nonprofit, that can be tough. But I do think if you can find a place to volunteer, without having been admitted to the bar yet, I think that could be a really good entry point. And that'll let you know if you, want to pursue this as a full-time job. There are, I don't know what is happening in California, but there are many entry-level positions available in New York, and I imagine in other places. So it's also a good place to start.
I recommend volunteering for different clinics. There's asylum clinics, there's naturalization clinics, where you see generally the type of work that we do, the type of questions that we ask, and the type of people that we help. So they're usually on the weekends. You can volunteer for 8 hours and get a general sense of the type of stuff we do.
Just due to time, that went fast. We'll have to cut it off there. But if we didn't get to your question today, I think there's just a couple that we didn't get to. Feel free to email me at CELA and we can answer those. I do want to just flag that we have really great handouts for today's presentation. They're all on that webpage that we circulated. We also included some additional CELA resources that I thought you might be interested in if you are here today, just on removal proceedings and a lot of great materials. So please check those out and please do stay connected with us, whether that's joining one of our newsletters that goes out, going to us for technical assistance support, or checking out our resources, or following us on social media. So again, as you close the Zoom, you will be directed to a feedback survey. Please fill that out. We'd love to hear from you on how today's training went. And if you're hoping to get CLE credit, we're going to be emailing everybody a form. So please do request CLE credit once you get that and include that code that was previously verbally provided. thank you so much to our panelists, and thank you for being with us today.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.